My name is Marina, I'm 34. And that evening I discovered my husband had been sending money, our money, to another woman behind my back. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. The glow of my phone lit the kitchen table, a pale rectangle against the dark. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock above it. I had just logged into our joint bank account to schedule the usual utilities. $186. $40 for electricity, $92. $15 for water, $1,145 rent due the following Tuesday. My finger hovered over the autopay button when I noticed something odd. 3 transfers. Same amount each time. $2,500. Same recipient. Same vague memo. Personal support. Dated the 5th of every month for the past 3 months. My throat tightened. I blinked, refreshed the screen, scrolled back through the activity log, but the numbers didn't change. I rubbed my palm over the smooth wood of the table as if the texture could anchor me, could make the zeros and commas line up differently the second time around. But no, it was still there. We had spoken just last week about how tight things were, how maybe I should pick up a side project to cover groceries. He'd sighed about his student loan payment and said, "We've got to watch every dollar right now. Every dollar except these ones apparently." The refrigerator hummed louder, or maybe my ears were ringing. I picked up the ceramic mug I'd abandoned earlier, cold coffee, bitter at the back of my tongue, and pressed it against my lips to stop the trembling. I didn't know yet that in 72 hours, I'd have more than a bank transfer to confirm the truth. The next morning I stood in the kitchen again, same clock ticking, same fridge hum, but the air felt sharper. I'd slept maybe 3 hours, my mind looping those numbers, $2,500, $2,500, $2,500 like a broken metronome. He came in at 7:14, tie half knotted, the smell of his cologne still too fresh, stinging my nose. He set his travel mug on the counter with a clink and scrolled his phone, thumb jerking up and down. "Can we talk about the bank account?" I asked, steady but quiet. He didn't look up. "What about it?" "The transfers. Same recipient, same note. $2,500 each month." That made him freeze just a beat too long. Then he slid his phone in his pocket and took a sip from the mug. "It's nothing. Just helping out a friend. She's going through a tough time." "She?" My voice was calm, but I could feel the pulse in my neck. He shrugged. "Coworker. You don't know her." I watched the steam curl from his mug, smelled the sharp roast. The lie was so casual it almost sounded like truth. But $7,500 isn't casual. It's rent for 6 months. It's the emergency savings we'd said we didn't have. "You didn't think you should mention thousands of dollars leaving our account?" He sighed, setting the mug down harder than necessary. "You always blow things out of proportion. It's just money. I'll get a bonus next quarter, we'll be fine." Just money. I had spent last week debating between a $14 generic detergent and the $19 brand I liked because, according to him, we needed to cut corners. Just money. I wiped my hands on the cotton dish towel hanging from the oven handle and looked at him fully. "I won't do this anymore. Not blind." He rolled his eyes, grabbed his keys, and left with the door slamming behind him. The towel was still damp in my hand. I folded it slowly, deliberately, and set it on the counter. A plan was starting to form, faint but sharp-edged. It would be easy to say I should have seen it coming. But the truth is, the pattern had been there for years. Small dismissals, brushed off concerns, subtle ways of tightening control without calling it that. We met when I was 27. He was already established at his firm, driving a leased silver BMW, while I was juggling freelance design contracts and a single-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of mildew no matter how much I cleaned. He looked at me like I was a project to be polished. First, that felt flattering. When we married at 30, he insisted we merge accounts. "It'll be simpler. Transparency is key." I agreed, thinking it meant partnership. Slowly, I realized it meant surveillance. If I bought a $5 latte on a Tuesday, he'd comment that evening, "Maybe make coffee at home?" If I booked a yoga class, he'd ask why I couldn't just run around the block for free. But when he splurged, $480 on golf clubs, $320 on a watch upgrade, it was an investment. I learned not to argue. We signed the lease on this 2-bedroom apartment 3 years ago. 940 square feet. Beige carpet, thin walls. He picked it mostly for the proximity to his office. My commute doubled, but that didn't factor. I paid half the rent even when freelance gigs dried up. To him, it was always a given that my income was supplementary, never central. I told myself things would even out. That once I had steadier work, the imbalance would shrink. And for a while I believed it. I landed a big contract last spring. Put away $3,000 in a personal savings account I opened quietly. That was the first real taste of independence I'd felt in years. And now, with 3 unexplained transfers, the stakes were suddenly bigger than detergent or yoga classes. We weren't just talking about lifestyle differences. We were talking about thousands gone without discussion, about trust evaporating into digits on a screen. I remembered the day we signed our prenup. I'd skimmed it too quickly, distracted by wedding seating charts and flowers. He'd said, "It's just standard, protects us both." But the clauses about joint assets, how anything moved from one shared account could be considered mutual consent, that clause echoed in my head now like a warning bell. Because if those transfers weren't innocent, and I knew in my gut they weren't, then I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I was compromised financially. I didn't know yet exactly where the money had gone. But I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't let him keep the upper hand. 2 nights later, I sat at my desk with the blinds half closed, the glow of the laptop screen making the room feel colder than it was. My inbox pinged. A monthly statement notification from the bank. Normally I'd skim and archive. That night I downloaded the PDF. The pages scrolled past. Grocery charges, utility drafts, a few Amazon purchases. Then, in bold black font, the line items I already knew but hated to see on paper. May 5th, online transfer. $2,500. Memo, personal support. 06/05 online transfer. $2,500. Memo, personal support. July 5th, online transfer. $2,500. Memo, personal support. Seeing them printed, stamped with dates, shook me differently than the app. The document felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of the lie itself. I clicked print, and listened to the whir of the machine in the corner. Each page slid out warm, smelling faintly of ink. I stacked them, pressed my palm flat on top, and felt something inside me settle. I highlighted the transfers with a yellow marker. My hand trembled, but the lines were straight. I snapped a photo on my phone. Then another, close up on the transaction memo. I texted it to myself as backup. A short phrase from his last excuse echoed in my head. "You always blow things out of proportion." I stared at the words personal support until they blurred and whispered aloud, "This is proportion." Then I opened a manila folder from the drawer, slid the statement inside, and wrote on the tab in block letters, "Evidence." It was a small, almost absurdly formal act, but it clicked something into place. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. I had proof and with it a choice. The next morning I took the folder with me, tucked flat under my arm, and walked to a cafe 3 blocks away. The place smelled of burnt espresso and buttered croissants. I slid into a corner booth, ordered a black coffee, and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. An accountant friend, someone I trusted because he was blunt, not because he was gentle. When he picked up, I said only, "I need a reality check." He met me there 30 minutes later, still in his office slacks, tie loosened. I slid the folder across the sticky wooden table. He pulled the pages out, one by one, brow tightening as he read. 3 transfers, $2,500 each, he said, tapping the dates. "That's $7,500. Gone." "I know," I murmured, wrapping my hands around the hot ceramic mug, letting the heat bite into my palms. He didn't sugarcoat. "Look, Marina, in a joint account, unless you've got explicit written limits, this counts as joint consent. He can argue you agreed by not objecting at the time. So what do? You document everything. Keep every statement, every screenshot. And you protect your own cash now. Separate account, his name nowhere near it. If you don't, by next month it could be 10 grand. 10 grand. The number landed in my chest like a weight. I thought of the $3,000 I'd tucked into my private account, my one act of quiet defiance. That account suddenly felt less like a cushion and more like oxygen. He closed the folder and pushed it back to me. You don't have to decide today whether this is divorce or confrontation. But you can't pretend it's fine. Money like this? It's never just helping a friend. I nodded, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. Steam wand hissing, plates clinking. His words anchored me as sharp as they were. Walking home, the folder pressed against my ribs under my coat. I repeated it to myself. Document everything. Protect your cash. That night, while he watched TV in the living room, I sat at the kitchen table under the yellow pendant light and opened a new browser tab. I filled out an application for a separate checking account in my name only. I clicked submit at 9:46 p.m. The confirmation email hit instantly. The line had been drawn. The bank lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and new carpet. I stood at the counter, folder tucked under my arm again, while the teller clicked through her screen. I'd like to remove my name from auto payments on the joint account, I said. My voice was calm, rehearsed. She looked up, polite but neutral. Do you want to cancel the autopay entirely or redirect it? Cancel, I said. All of it. Utilities, rent, subscriptions. Her nails tapped the keyboard. Done. Effective immediately. A small, clean sentence, but it felt like breaking a chain. Next, I slid my ID across the counter. And I've opened a new account in my name. I want all direct deposits rerouted there. Starting this pay cycle. She nodded, stamped a form, and slid it back to me with a pen. The blue ink bled a little on the thin paper as I signed. By 10:22 a.m. It was official, my income was mine. The joint account would starve without me. When I got home, the apartment was quiet except for the faint buzz of the refrigerator. I opened the drawer by the entryway, pulled out the small basket where we tossed mail, and slipped a copy of the cancellation form inside. Not hidden, just there waiting for him to find. That evening, when he scrolled through his phone on the couch, I sat in the armchair across from him, legs crossed, folder in my lap. I didn't slam it down or shout. I simply opened it, slid the highlighted statement across the coffee table and said, I know where the money is going. And I've cut off the autopays. His jaw tightened. You did what? I'm not funding this anymore. For the first time in years, he didn't have a ready line. He just stared at the paper, color rising in his neck. I stood, closed the folder, and carried it back to the bedroom without waiting for his response. Behind me, the silence was louder than a slammed door. The fallout came fast. 2 days after I canceled the autopays, the landlord called at 8:17 a.m. His voice was sharp through the receiver. The rent didn't clear. Is there an issue? I almost smiled, though I kept my voice level. No issue on my side. You'll need to speak with him directly. That afternoon, the internet cut out. I sat cross-legged on the living room rug, laptop open, waiting for the connection to return, until I realized the bill hadn't been paid. For once, it wasn't my problem. I closed the laptop, pulled my phone's hotspot on, and kept working. By the third day, the fridge hummed emptier. He opened the door, stared at the half-shelf of eggs and condiments, and muttered, When are you doing groceries? I didn't look up from my screen. I'm not. Not from that account. The air went thick. He slammed the fridge door hard enough to rattle the magnets. Small things began to shift. He came home later, his tie loosened, his voice sharper. I noticed him checking his phone in the bathroom, closing the door when he hadn't before. Once, at 11:42 p.m., I heard his muffled voice through the thin wall, urgent and low. But I no longer asked. I no longer begged for explanation. My only words were precise, necessary. When he snapped about bills, I said, handled. When he muttered about me being cold, I said, boundaries. Nothing more. On the fifth day, a notification hit my phone at 2:09 p.m. Overdraft alert, joint account negative $128.47. I closed the app, locked the phone, and exhaled through my nose. For the first time, I wasn't the one absorbing the damage. That evening, I pulled out the manila folder again, smoothed the papers across the dining table, and whispered to the empty room. This is what it looks like when I stop patching the holes. A small win, but not the end. It was a Tuesday evening when the second piece of evidence arrived, almost by accident. I'd gone to grab the mail, the metal slot clanging shut behind me, and tucked the envelopes under my arm. Back inside, I flipped through credit card offer, utility reminder, glossy pizza coupon. Then, an envelope with his firm's logo, addressed to both of us. I slid it open with the butter knife from the counter. Inside was a benefit statement, retirement contributions, health plan deductions, and under dependent coverage, a line item that made my stomach drop. Additional spouse coverage, $243. 15 monthly, effective May 1st. Spouse. Not me. My name was already listed separately. I read it twice, heat rising in my chest. He hadn't just been transferring money. He'd added someone else, under spousal benefits, which meant paperwork, declarations, lies written down and filed. When he came home that night, I set the letter flat on the dining table, beneath the low yellow light. He dropped his keys, glanced at it, and froze. "What is this?" I asked, my tone almost clinical. He swallowed. It's a clerical thing. HR mix-up." I slid the paper an inch toward him. "A mix-up that deducts $243. 15 every month?" His face tightened. "You're making this bigger than it is." I felt the steadiness in my own voice, surprising even me. "No. I'm making it exact. Transfers. Benefits. Dates. Amounts. Documented." For the first time, he didn't argue. He just stared at the paper, silent, his jaw ticking. I gathered the letter, slid it into the manila folder, and closed it with a soft thud. "There's no way back from this," I said. Calm. Certain. He didn't follow me when I walked down the hall. I moved out on a gray Saturday morning in August. The air was heavy with heat, cicadas buzzing outside the windows, boxes stacked by the door. I didn't shout, I didn't plead. I carried one suitcase, a cardboard box of kitchen basics, and the manila folder tucked in my backpack like a spine. By noon I was unlocking the door to a small one-bedroom apartment on the east side, 620 square feet, wood floors scratched but warm. The windows stuck a little, but light streamed through them in wide golden bars. I set my keys on the counter, turned slowly in the quiet, and exhaled. 3 months have passed. My paycheck goes straight into my own account now. Rent is $1,150, always paid on time. I keep the fridge stocked with what I like: spinach, blueberries, oat milk, and no one comments on the receipts. I bought a second-hand sofa for $300, and when I stretch out on it at night with my laptop, the hum in my chest isn't dread anymore. It's peace. He still texts occasionally. Once, "We need to talk." Another time, "You're overreacting. We can fix this." I don't reply. I forward everything to the folder labeled documents and leave it at that. I've met with a lawyer twice. The process is slow but steady. Divorce paperwork, asset division, a clear financial boundary carved into legal record. For the first time, the word boundary doesn't feel abstract. Feels like a door that closes and locks. Some evenings I sit at my little kitchen table with a cup of peppermint tea, steam rising into the quiet, and write in a notebook. Not about him, not about betrayal, but about what I want in 6 months. Maybe a new contract, maybe a trip somewhere on my own. Small plans. Plans that don't depend on anyone else's permission. The silence here is different from the silence I used to live with. It isn't heavy. It's breathable. And when I think about the $7,500, the statements, the letter with someone else listed as spouse, I don't shake anymore. I don't need to. Because my life is mine again, line by line, dollar by dollar, breath by breath. Tonight, I close the blinds, set my tea down, and whisper to myself the simplest truth. I am not overreacting. I am choosing myself. And that's enough.